we would like to present to you Zion's Black History Moment.
Good morning. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. Brian Sims. I'm a full professor, full tenured professor at the University of Alabama, Birmingham in the Division of Neonatology, the Department of Pediatrics. So the question is, how did I get selected to give the Black History Moment? And I'm honored. I'm humbled, actually. And before I get into too many details, I just want you guys to know my home address is 2128 Northland Avenue Southwest, which is less than 2 miles from this location. So when I was coming into this church, I passed by the old spinning wheel. And for people who are my age or so, my dad would take us there to get some ice cream. Okay, Harrison Park. I was there for a Christmas event. I spoke there. Where we used to play, and that's the first place I learned how to play basketball, less than 2 miles from here. And so for me, just coming to this place is special to me. So one thing that I always like to talk about, when we talk about Black history, you know, when you break that word and what's his story? And so I'd like to touch on a little bit on how I got here and how I met the little drummer boy. Okay, I'm going to talk about that, and hopefully it'll make sense when we get toward the end. But as a young student at Powderly Elementary, it's not open right now, but if anyone has heard of Powderly Elementary, it's closed. But that's where I first went to elementary. Went there for 4 years, and then we moved. One of my dreams in life was to be a doctor and to be a West End Panther. Now, I don't know if you guys know, but back in the day when West End High School, their feeder program were the West End Panthers. And so my goal was to one day play football for the West End Panthers. But we moved and we changed locations. And so that dream didn't come true. But the other dream about being a doctor started at an early age. My mom was ill when I was 12, and I had 2 younger siblings. My sister Benita and my sister Felicia, who were 2 and 8 months at the time. And so my mom, I've realized later as I learned more about medicine, she had a ruptured ovarian cyst and literally lost like 4 liters of blood and was on death's door. So she stayed in the hospital about 2 to 3 weeks, and my father would have to go to the hospital and care for her. So who would take care of my 2-year-old and 8-month-old sister? And for some reason, my mother taught me how to take care of my siblings at 12 years old, or even before that time. I was the one that went and got the diapers, changed them, made sure they were feeding. And for some reason, my mother invested that time in me. And so when she got sick, I literally took over. So in the 8th grade, roughly 7th to 8th grade, I slept next to my siblings. I woke up when they woke up because, again, my dad was going back and forth to the hospital. I literally took over the care of a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old at 12. So the biggest way to keep young people from having babies too young is make them work, okay? Because this was a known fact that I had no desire to have children before time for me to have children because I understood what having children entailed. But I give this because it pulled out the excitement that I had for children. It showed me the passion that I had for taking care of kids. And then I was really good with science and math. And so I started looking into things that I could see myself doing for the rest of my life. And medicine started to rise up to the top. My brother chose engineering, and that was the thing to do for people that like science for him. And I tried that, and I realized I had to be around people. That's what I love. I love taking care of people, and so that was something that I was really excited about. But one of the things that pushed me were my parents. My parents gave me a lot of excitement to move on, and some of that excitement came. My father was the pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church, which is less than 2 miles from here. I'll be going there after I leave here. But one of the things was, as the pastor is, you didn't go in the pulpit. So if you wonder why I'm standing down here, I'm still obedient. Okay, decades later, I'm still obedient. You didn't go in the pool, and that's just how I was raised. So, okay with you guys, I speak from here as a non-clergy. I stay right down here because the Lord is still working on me. So, but I just want you to understand that having that background, when we talk about how can we help our kids be great, you have to push your kids to be great. And I had a lot of pushing. I'll tell you, a lot of pushing over. And it was just that the standard was you had to give your best. If your best was a C, it was accepted if that was your best. But if your best had the potential of being an A, I couldn't bring home a B. And I thank my parents in retrospect. My father passed several years ago. My mother's still alive. But I thank them for letting me be the best that I could be at an early age. A mom asked me one time, I have a 7th grade son, could you give him some advice on how to become a dentist? I said, sure. He came over and I said, son, be the best 7th grader you can be. I say, then be the best 8th grader, then be the best 9th grader. If you're in the 2nd grade, be the best 2nd grader you can be. If you're in kindergarten, be the best kindergartner you can be. One game my dad taught me that helped me more than anything, he taught me a game called sit down and be quiet. And the perk of the game is if you did it, you didn't get the consequences of not doing it. So it was exciting for us to play the game by the rules that he taught. But those things that he taught me helped me throughout my life. So I went to Ramsey High School, finished Ramsey High School, and I had this dream of becoming a doctor. So what do you do with that dream? I had 5 other siblings. Money was an issue. We didn't have a lot of finances. So I took my dream 8 blocks down to UAB. And I chose UAB because economically, I could actually work and pay for college. So I worked at Food World, Western first, Food World, Burger King. I did all of these jobs, but the destination was always in sight. And young people understand that, appreciate the process. It doesn't matter where your starting point is. It's what is your finish? What is your goal? And so as I was thinking about becoming a doctor, I read stories about doctors that had come before me since it's Black History Month. Doctors like Charles Drew, who at a young age in the World War II, people were dying because soldiers would get injured and they would bleed, and there was no way to keep their blood pressure up if you didn't give them volume, and in particular, if they couldn't have blood, but the blood was spoiled. So Charles Drew figured out a way how to preserve blood, and still to this day, the Red Cross is founded on the principles he actually put into place. So he saved thousands and thousands of soldiers because he taught us how to preserve blood, and that's how he saved so many people, and that was his contribution as a doctor. Ironically, he had a tragic car accident. He went to a hospital that was mainly white hospital that wouldn't treat him. And he had to go to another hospital, and by that time he died. So the thing that he put in place for thousands wasn't even available for him because of the times that we worked in. So these are stories that I read, and listen, Gifted Hands by Dr. Ben Carson, where he separated the Siamese twins, their brains. It's called craniopagus, where you have 2 babies that are attached, their heads are attached, and he was part of the pioneering team that separated. It had never been done before, where a Siamese set of twins were separated and now could live individually. But these were the examples that I had in front of me of people who happen to be African American, but excellent physicians who contributed over time so I could make the decision to become a doctor. So at UAB, I majored in biology, finished UAB, and then went on to UAB School of Medicine and did the MD PhD. One thing I wanted to do was also do research in my selection to take care of kids, to incorporate research in that as well, and then went on to St. Louis to Washington University, St. Louis to do pediatrics, and then came back here for neonatology. Now that's the discipline of studying sick babies, babies with congenital problems or problems at birth, or babies that are preterm, and that's the population that we take care of. I finished my fellowship, and I became the first African-American neonatal African-American neonatologist in the state of Alabama. And when you and I don't say that boasting. I say that as if we have so much work to do. That's why I try to recruit young students when I see them and I know they have potential to be great. Isn't that Carter that I met earlier? Isn't that Carter? Okay. When I see students and I know they have the potential to be great, I like to push them. I like to keep checking on them, because do you realize how encouraging it is for a young man to hear a grown African-American male who's a doctor tell him you can be a doctor? Now, when Nick Saban does it, they applaud him, okay? Or when the college football coaches see a talented child, they reach out and touch him, and everybody applauds them. But if we see a talented young black man in particular, and it's not to isolate the women, but I'm just using African-American males because our numbers are lower than the women. But we don't applaud our talented youths enough. And that's the challenge, because to me, history is important, but what are we going to do with the history? The history right now is our numbers are off. Okay, it's not enough numbers, not just in medicine, just across the board, in young men going to college. And unfortunately, our young people are getting sucked into an easy life that no one else is living for real. But social media makes them think that if they do the least, they can get the most. And that's a setup for failure. It's a long grind to be a doctor. But one thing that makes being a physician excellent, and even from a biblical sense, you know, I get the question of, how do you manage being a Christian and being a physician? Well, I must tell you guys, I was a Christian before I was a physician. And so we can't ever forget who we are and who we're supposed to be. But what I found is, I had a fraternity brother of mine was having football practice, and he said, do you have any suggestions for incorporating the Lord in the practice? And I said, you do every time you exude what Christ is and what he is and how you treat the young men. The one thing I've noticed is I never walk into a room and tell people I'm a Christian. I find that strategy because Jesus didn't do that. Jesus didn't walk anywhere and boast that I am the Rose of Sharon. He never did that. So why is it that we feel we have to boast who we are and what we do, and instead of live the life? So it gets to, so how did I get here today? What did I do or part of to make me thought of as worthy to come here? Well, one incident is I got to meet a little drummer boy. Now, I didn't know he was going to be a drummer. I didn't know that at the time. But I was pulled into a room, and I get this a lot, being the only African-American in my division. I get pulled into things, and people ask me, what is my opinion about whatever the medical condition is? So I got pulled in with JW, okay? I got pulled in. I wasn't technically on, but I was around, so I got pulled in. And they asked me my opinion about JW's case. And again, with parents' permission, I'm giving this story. But the thing about it is, they had been given advice that his condition was lethal. And at a certain point, if you take away support, the baby will pass. That's a true statement. But they asked my opinion. And I gave the opinion that his condition wasn't lethal. His condition is actually a condition that we'll work with, but it's not a condition that'll take his life. And that's how I got introduced to the little drummer boy. And so it's an honor for me to be here and see him doing so well. But, amen. But what made me confident enough to make that call when the majority of people around him had said other things? What gave me that sort of feeling? And it's back to what you asked me about being a Christian. Okay? God talks to us all. And that's one thing that game I told you my dad taught us. You can't hear Christ if you're talking all the time. Be quiet. Hear what God is trying to tell you. And for me, I've learned to listen. And a lot of times people will say, well, I don't know if the Lord talking, because other people talk as well. So I don't want to say the voices you hear are necessarily Christ, but that's where the listening comes in. You have to decipher when you're hearing from the Lord and when you're just hearing chatter. The Lord will give you the message that I'm talking to you. Are you listening? And if you prepare yourself well enough, God will put you in the right place at the right time. You know, Black history is filled with examples of great people that were right where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to be there. Harriet Tubman found a way to free herself. But why stop there? Okay, Luke 12:48, and this is the verse my children put it on their door because I held them to this standard. It says, to he that is given much, much is required of them. Now, the context of that verse is Peter was basically asking the Lord that will we be judged like everybody else? And the Lord was basically telling them, no, you are held to a higher standard. And when God blesses us, when he gives me a skill set that I know other people don't have, instead of boast about it, use it to help somebody. And those are standards that if we have those standards in our life every day, you will help somebody. It's young people that need us. They need the examples. But it's hard to give an example if you're not an example. Okay, so it sounds great to say, I'm going to tell you what to do, but it's something about showing somebody what to do. I coached my son's basketball team for many years. He's gone on married now. But one of the great things about his basketball team was I could see the young men look at me in the eyes, asking me questions about growing up. One young man asked me, say, Coach. I said, yes, sir. He said, can we curse? And I said, sure, when you hear me curse. And they said, that's fair. Okay, these are 10-year-old boys that understood the point that if you do what I do, it's okay. But if you step outside of that, we have a problem. People are looking to us for an example. JW is watching me. Okay, my son asked me one time, he said, I was shaving. He said, and I looked at it, I said, are you watching everything I'm doing? He said, yes, sir. I said, everything? He said, yes, sir. I said, everything. He said, yes, sir. But the thing about it is they're watching us. They're watching us make history, so to speak. But it's sad that we're still doing the first in 2024. It's sad. It's a need for more. It's a need for more people to be aggressive about this success that we want to have. I'm supposed to talk at Parker High School in the morning for their Honor Society induction. And one thing I ask high school students is, what kind of life do you want to live? Every student I've talked to say they want to live this fabulous life, mainly in Atlanta, doing all this stuff with an Infiniti SUV and all these things, but it comes a point with what work are you going to do to get there? And for instance, to be a physician, you have to put a certain amount of work in and be okay with that work. Because when they asked me to come in JW's room, I was prepared. Everybody understand? When they asked me to talk to a mom with a baby that's 21 weeks and 1 day, never survived before at this age, when I walked in the room and had that discussion with the mom, and a year later, that baby is the most preterm baby to ever survive in the world. Wow. In the world. So this is, and you can Google, for the young people who don't think I'm telling the truth, you can Google it, okay? The UAB was a part of the most premature baby in the world. But again, why was I on call that night? Isn't that something to think about, Ms. Nathan? Isn't that something to think about? See, I stopped asking God questions decades ago. I've learned to go when it's time for me to go. I don't ask any more questions. He's answered all the questions I need answered. So I don't have any more questions. So when you go through things, don't forget how you got here. People had to be in my life to help me be where I am today. I'll never discount that. So, but what responsibility do I have? To he that is given much, much is required from them. And those things we have to keep in mind, because there's so much stuff that we need to do to help the future of Black America. These are things, it's not a stagnant thing that we have to stop. And another thing, please help our young people know you can't pop off all the time. You can't just say what you want to say. Okay, and the reason I say that as a physician is, don't think that I don't have situations where I want to say something, but I don't say something. Okay, and some people call that selling out, or I'm not being real, or I'm not. But the truth is, push your agenda. They have this thing called direct deposit. If you be quiet, it keeps coming. Okay, and again, and I'm not saying don't speak up when you're supposed to. I spoke up when it was JW's turn for me to speak up. I spoke up when the preterm baby that's 21 weeks, who's also African American, I spoke up then as well. So speaking up doesn't have to be confrontational when you're the right person speaking. People start to listen to you speak when you're worthy of listening to. They used to call it E.F. Hutton, but the truth is, prepare yourself to be the one that they listen to. Another skill set that I have in the unit is, they say vascular access. I was watching the SEC championship a couple of years ago. It was a little baby. Nobody could get any access. And I don't know if you think about it, but if a patient is critically ill, they need IV medicine. But if you can't get the IV in, they will die. So they called me watching TV, and they called me and asked, do you mind coming in? I said, sure. I went in, took care of that. The baby survived. I saw the parents months later. The baby was going home. But what if I had stayed at home to watch the game? See, another thing, a dream that I forgot to tell you guys about is, I wanted to be the kind of doctor that was like Superman, okay? And so I wanted to be called when there was trouble. Call me. I want to be called, but what does that mean for my lifestyle, though? I can't be inebriated when they call me. I have to have control of my faculties when they call me. So I can't smoke weed when they call me because I have a job to do. A young man asked me, I get a lot of questions from young people. He said, Doc, what do you think about smoking weed? I said, if you're smoking it in a state that's illegal, stop smoking it. And he said, that's fair. And anything that can put you in harm's way. I used to work at a detention center for youth detention center in undergraduate. When you hear those metal doors close, I'm working there. But I heard as soon as they buzzed me and I stepped through the door and I hear this clack, 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 boom. You can't get out until the man pushed the button. I never wanted to live like that. If you've ever measured a jail cell, if you've ever measured it, it's smaller sometimes than the corner that the drummer is using. Who wants to live like that? And for young men that want to get married and all, there are no women there. Understand, and I'm talking about the biblical way to date and get married, but you don't date. You get confined to a space like an animal. Who wants to do that? But again, as a future doctor, I knew that couldn't be part of my life. When I finished medical school, I had to list every activity that I had done since high school. I had to put every month of every year from the time I finished high school to the time I finished medical school. So if you were incarcerated, you had to explain what happened to your time. If you take that out of the equation, you don't have to worry about that. What I've learned is if you take yourself out of certain categories, you can be successful. One is this notion of single family homes. That's not true if you're a Christian. If Jesus is in there, that's one already. And we have to understand that black moms have been taking care of kids for decades by themselves at times. In slavery, the man was pulled away. Mom took care of things, but she did it with Jesus. And those are things that we have to understand. Anything that we do, whether it's be a physician, an architect, an engineer, Jesus is always in order. I get the question all the time about incorporating Jesus in, but the truth is, I've never heard a parent tell me they didn't want me to pray for them. They didn't want my Christian views to help their kids, because all Christ says is to love, care for people. Who wouldn't want that for their child? They say, Dr. Sims, you never have an issue with parents. That's because I treat them like I want my children treated. So they see that, they watch that, and they see that this guy's all right. And I don't have any confrontations with atheists, with Muslims, no one has a problem with, if you really are acting Christ-like, you don't get enemies. People appreciate you caring for theirs the way they're supposed to. So just understand, and through it all, I just want you to understand that God will put your steps. When they say, order my steps in the word, God will place you where sometimes it's so fascinating to me. I was off, I rescheduled, I shifted some schedules around. I wasn't supposed to be on this night, and I walked by a family's room and they say, we were waiting on you. That's powerful. How did I get there? But like I say, I stopped asking questions. I just report to duty, and I just do my due diligence. But I just want to stop there. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you guys for this opportunity. And again, JW, it was good to see you.
Glory